Hello, everybody. I'm Ryan Lockmeyer, and I'm doing my book review in Module 6, the Activist and Applied Lens book review. I'm with my helper, Nick, and then Isle, the cat, right over there, because of this quarantine. But anyways, here's the cover of my book, Infoglut. How Too Much Information is Changing the Way We Think and Know by Mark Andreevich. It's 165 pages. It's not super long, but it goes into detail about a media criticism and critical theory about mainly what I got out of it is how the media has its own message and they portray what they want to get out. Based on Leland's video, he mentioned examples of saying one was an ad in the UK about it was like something army advertisement, join the army, and then it goes ask us, and then someone spray painted on the bottom and ask the mothers whose sons died in the war. So kind of this not hypocritical view, but another example was the men of industry like oil and the railroad tycoons talking about like social issues or like wealth or job employment issues. So the other one was in the book, how messages are perceived. So what I got out of it, connecting with Leland's video and the Infoglut book, was how there are 5 or 6 companies that own most of the media, like Fox, NBC, ABC, CBS, and they all have their kind of view that they want to put out. So to take a look at that video and read the few pages in our textbook, that kind of helps connect with this view. But chapter 1 was talking about post 9/11 and how government agencies were taking information from citizens and that there is so much information that they can't keep up with it. They just can't track everything. So this information overload, kind of like what we see now with social media and just the media in general. There's so many shows, so many talking heads and pundits, you can't keep up with what everyone says. And I like the title of this book, Infoglut, kind of like information, and then gluttony. So too much information. And the media landscape has changed so much over the years. They mentioned how people like Walter Cronkite, people would just trust. They would believe him in whatever the news said because, the news is trustworthy. They don't lie to us. And now there's a poll that says Americans don't trust the media, that they're biased and have their own messages they want to push out there. And with social media, a few chapters talks about how social media plays an impact in security and policing. Mentioned mass shootings and how now there's a footprint on some of them. Like example, Dylan Roof in South Carolina, he had YouTube videos and Facebook posts and all this online stuff, and so they kind of looked back and said, "Oh, this is kind of how it happened," as opposed to the past where we didn't have this technology and information. All the families wondered how this happened. That was one example in the book. And then Twitter and Facebook with all the viral things going on in the world. In chapter 3, they talked about how the NSA looks for threats immediately, and they just comb through the posts and they just look for things that stand out to them. And with security and policing, also in chapter 2, they talked about video cameras, things like the Minority Report movie, how the movie talked about kind of policing crimes before they happened, with algorithms and all the technology like GPS tracking, and how companies and governments and police are using technology to help them with all this information overload. They talked about politics, a lot of it in the middle chapters 4, 5, and even 7. Chapters 4 and 5 were talking about politics and experts, how some people don't trust experts now because this view of anyone can be an expert, pretty much. Like kind of that one example of anyone can be a journalist if they have a phone and an online presence, and how everything is kind of not decentralized, but there's more options available to anyone. One thing was a trademark, not a company, but a product, I think, is called TweetView. So companies, not just governments and policing, companies use this for marketing. So TweetView is a trademark product, and it measures influence of tweets to a company and how companies and brands and even people now use social media to put out sorry to put out products and things to help their brand. And then that chapter kind of segued into the one about markets, which kind of goes with the experts, and how it was one quote in the book about futarchy, Futarchy, about how people try to predict the future of the market, and so they'll just rely on the experts. In politics now, they've mentioned in 2008 and 12 about how company or politicians would not rely on the experts to try to not subvert them, but just they kind of listen to their own opinions and their own policymakers instead of actual experts. And so with questioning experts, went into another chapter about, excuse me, about conspiracy theories. So there's, with the conspiracy theories, they talked about body language analysis. So now any interview someone does, there's a body analysis video on YouTube about what they got about the report or the interview and if they're lying or not. So these conspiracy theories, which were in chapter 7, talked about 9/11, the truthers, how it was a controlled demolition, and the usual suspects and the usual message those, I guess, thinkers come across as is how everything was planned. It's not how it is. You can't trust the media. And it mentioned the Gulf of Tonkin, the conspiracy theory that, not conspiracy theory, but back in the Vietnam War to push the politics and the policies of advancing in Vietnam. They mentioned that, as well as the Zeitgeist documentary. And it was this, they mentioned it was a pseudo conspiracy documentary. And I've seen it, it was on Netflix, but it talks about all kinds of stuff, and people kind of believed it just because there's so many sources out there and people that push certain views. And if you look too much into those views, people kind of get hooked on those and they just ride with it and go with it, and they don't believe actual experts or other information because they think the information is tainted. And speaking of tainted information, it goes on to chapter 8 about fact checkers, and it talked about who fact checks the fact checkers and how people have lots of distrust and they don't believe in the fact checkers. And what this whole book was about was very critical and skeptical. It had a lot of quotes from the philosopher Slavoj Zizek, an Eastern European famous philosopher, and talking about how many conspiracy theories and ways of thinking are, not corrupted, but, have specific views. And so I liked this book. It was critical on both ends, really. It wasn't just one-sided or biased. One thing I related to in the media criticism was how NBC News, Brian Williams was on a few years ago, the head host of the news, NBC News with Brian Williams, and he lied about a helicopter story or something of him being involved in a helicopter shooting or something like that, and just totally lied about it. And then he got canned, and just solidified the fact of some people that the media lies. They don't believe in them, believe in what they say. But he's now on MSNBC, so people kind of, I guess, forgot about it over time. But that was just one example I thought of based on reading this book. And it does apply to this, the activist and applied lens view by activists take on social media. They take on social media by pushing their causes and promoting what they believe in, and then just kind of questioning authorities and sources and information, and not just believing everything you hear. And that kind of way of thinking has gone up all the way the higher points of government and politicians, in that they kind of believe in what they want to believe, and people want to believe what they want to believe because there is information out there that can back them up no matter what it is, if it's believable or not. And this Infoglut book just talks about how just we're in an information overload, is to sum it up. And I enjoyed it very much. The author did a great job of explaining, going through the chapters little by little about how things kind of are the way they are, and how this view and how technology has advanced so much. It is just changing our world greatly and how we think about it and see it. Because now you go on Facebook and Twitter, and it's just everything's polarized and divisive, no matter what it is, if it's politics or cultural or social, anything. And that's kind of what this book has talked about. And I hope check out that video from Dr. Leland and the couple readings to go along with it to help understand kind of my points in this book. But thank you so much. Have a good day.